Welcome back to another episode of Some Old AV Guy. My name's Eric, as always. Today's guest is Chip Lacure. Chip is a good friend of mine and mentor from when we both worked for an AV production house for 20 years. Welcome, Chip.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning. Great to see you again. And boy, I'm flattered that you have me here. I was looking at your other old podcasts, and it's kind of fun to see some of those things coming up. You forget about them when you're retired.
Absolutely.
So,
So,
but I've enjoyed that. I'm glad you're doing it. It's a good thing, and I'm sure there's some good benefits for people.
exactly. So, speaking of that, how are you enjoying your retirement?
Well, I think you know full well that I'm loving it, and you kind of know what our lifestyle has been like since we retired. For the viewers, I've been on the road for almost 4 years now. We sold our home a couple of weeks after retirement, jumped in an RV motorhome, and that and our little Jeep we tow around with us. We've been all over the country, been up to Alaska a couple times, all over Canada. We've really enjoyed retirement, and we feel it's a good lifestyle for the time being. Get out and do stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so, for our viewers, if you could just kind of give them a quick synopsis of what got you into the AV sales industry.
Sure. Some of the things in my earlier career of this sort of live event business, I worked in convention and visitors bureaus, and I worked in a few of them. In Salt Lake City, one in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then finally where we met in Rochester, New York. Plus, I worked along the way in hotels, a couple of hotels and a convention center. So for me, that was a good formation for what I was doing in the AV business. As you know, we met when you were in house at one of the properties, and we met
Right.
there. And I think the owner kind of recruited me through you. Had you come over with a little gift and gave me the gift, and then I called Eric. I said, "What's with the gift?" And after a while, he told me he needed somebody in sales, and I called him back and said, "Hey, I might be your guy." So, very unique kind of relationships through you and him that got me into this side of it. And I think one of your previous visitors was Al Ingalls, who I know as well. And Al says you just don't wake up in the morning thinking that you're going to go work in the AV business. It's not like that. And if you would ask me when I first started out, what was I looking to get into this? I would have said no. I had no idea what existed here. And so a little bit of osmosis and being in the right place at the right time, and then it worked.
Exactly, exactly. So speaking of relationships, some of our viewers come to us via a social platform called Reddit, and they have asked what kind of uh, practices you use in order to forge these long-lasting relationships, and specifically with clients.
Sure. Well, and my background is a little different. I think you know this. I started out of college as a nurse. I worked as a nurse for a while,
Mhm.
but I took away some real valuable stuff in that practice there, which was a learning how to document patients' behaviors and interactions and the things you do for them, which helped me with my writing skills. But I also learned a lot about psych and a lot about interacting with people and talking to them and listening to people.
Mhm.
Throughout my career, I left the nursing and went into the hotels and AV, or excuse me, the hotels and CVB business. And those practices were real helpful at the beginning. But I also attended industry events,
Mhm.
and when they had educational sessions and so forth, I'd participate in those. Um, some of the things that I really enjoyed was that I could go sit in with a bunch of clients at these events and listen to an educational program about how do you fill out your contracts and how do you sign and execute them, or how do you choose a vendor, or what goes on in a site visit. All that stuff, was real valuable for me to kind of just assimilate and say, okay, now I can sell back to these people what they want, not just what I want to give them, but what they want and what they need.
Mhm.
Um, Finally, at the end of the day, when I'm sitting in those kinds of conferences and such, you get to walk out arm in arm with the clients if you do it right. So you get to meet people in there that, can become long-term friends and clients as well. And those are some of the nuggets that I felt like were real important to me going through especially the beginning years.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I remember was during the contract process that it isn't a here's your contract, this is the way it's going to be, and take it or leave it. It most contract processes, regardless of what industry they're in, there is a little give and take, and you can edit stuff in that contract. For instance, if there's a line item requiring you to use the in-house AV, um, you can negotiate that with the venue in order to bring your own AV company, or if you want to pay a less commission or whatever it is, it's a negotiation process as opposed to this is your contract and here you go and that's it.
Sure. And there's just a number of things like that. I never approached it as though I had to negotiate a contract.
Mhm.
I always approached it as, what are your needs? Let's get that big bag of stuff out, dump it on the chair here, and let's go through it and make sure that we address it, see if there's a good fit. And once you have that out in front of you, then you start talking about either the costs or the things associated with implementing them.
Mhm.
But having them all out on the very get go or over a short period of time before you start discussing any kind of negotiations, that prevents both of it from a string along negotiation. You give something to them at the front end, and then at the back end they take it back or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to be defensive here, but
Sure.
it keeps the focus on the prize, if you will. They want a great event. You want to make sure they have a great event. And so learning about all those things on the front end and asking a lot of probing questions will avoid any kind of misunderstandings, or one of those days you hang up the phone and you go, oh man, that guy just took advantage of me, or she got the best of me. So those are the things that I think were helpful to me, was to learn to, negotiate all at once on all of the items, or at least discuss them and understand them.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of brings me back to another point that you didn't just forge relationships with clients, you sold an idea. And as a project manager, it was kind of interesting sometimes because there were other project managers that I worked with that would say, oh, well, Chip just sold this idea, now we have to make it work. But that was the whole point of it, was that you would sell, this is the event that the client wants to put on, and you're in their corner. And then when it comes to making the event happen, the rest of the staff uh, made it come together. And it was really interesting and fun to see how that worked.
As I say, and especially with our model, because for the viewers, I don't know Jack when it comes to AV, and everybody should know that. But it was sort of a technical support um, model where if it was you and I, we were together and I'd show you what the client needed and you'd help write up the quotes. So we didn't get too far down a path where we sold an idea that wasn't workable,
Sure, sure.
but it also, it pushed the guys a little bit. Clients wanted something bigger, better, more. It was happening in the industry. At that time, we were a smaller company. So I think it helped us all to grow. And I always feel good about the fact that I didn't sell too much. I got this as a sort of a closing thing on my little notes, is I didn't sell too much that we couldn't accomplish, or that didn't involve a lot of dialogue with the project manager or the technical people. And I would say to any viewer, if you take one thing away and you're in the AV business selling, it is make sure the people who can deliver are on board, both
Absolutely.
with the product and the price, even in some cases.
Exactly. Exactly. So you had mentioned that you were involved in some groups, whether it's CVB or whatnot. Could you recommend some places or some groups to some new AV event managers to join or to look into?
Sure, or salespeople as well. Um, So I belonged to a handful of kind of industry events or industry organizations. We had a membership organization called the EPN. It used to be the RSN, but they've
Mhm.
changed their name. And they did that since I've left, so it's not top of mind. I think it's the Event Production Network is the
Sure.
actual name of the acronym. And but that's a select group. Their membership is based on geography, and it's an invited member to the group. So we were one of the members. It's maybe 30 or 40 companies nationwide. But there are some resources on their website that I would encourage you to have a look at the EPN
Mhm.
website. And likewise, there's an AV Alliance, which is a global network of AV companies. And I don't think their minimum requirements for membership are as stringent, and they allow a lot more competitors in around there. But internationally, it's cutting edge stuff, and it's also geared towards integrators as well. So there's a dual mix there.
Nice.
But then the easy ones for people, and I kind of always put on my small town hat. Not everybody lives in Washington or Indianapolis or Tampa or Orlando or one of the bigger cities. And so when you're thinking of the smaller organizations, certainly ASAE and their state affiliates. In New
Mhm.
York, we had SA, the Empire State Society of Association Executives, plus PCMA, Meeting Planners International. All of those organizations have events that are designed around education, and all of the educational opportunities to our clients, in my mind, were opportunities for me. Again, get back in that room with them.
Absolutely.
So those are a few of the ones that I'd suggest people looking at and seeing if they're a fit. I think also if you're in a little bit larger community and you have a real active chamber of commerce or a business development organization or your convention and visitors bureau, um, I think you have to be involved with them as well to try and if your geographical practice area is that area that you live in, then you've got to be involved in them and learning from them what's going on in the towns or cities that you live in.
They want to not just stay relevant in their own city, but stay out in the mindset of local clients because these local clients travel all over the country.
Yep. And you know this about me, Eric. I tell everyone, don't ever lose a contact. Somebody tells you who they are, you get their phone number or email. Now it's all email. It used to be phone numbers.
Yeah.
but you get that and you hang on to it. Be surprised when, you're running around doing sales calls in Washington and someone says, "Oh yeah, one of our members back in your town is so and so and he used to be on the board." And then all of a sudden the light clicks. It's like, I gotta know that person.
Exactly.
He or she, I got to get them into my world a little so they can influence, if they could, a decision to use us. And so, yeah, you stay in as many contacts as you possibly can locally, helps you nationally when you go hunting like that.
Absolutely. So speaking of clients that stick in your memory, do you have any specific clients that stay in your memory? And what about those relationships were so impactful to you?
When I first started out, I met a guy who was a hotel general manager. His name was Norm Canfield, great guy, worked for Hyatt. And he was such a easygoing guy, but driven to produce results. And he was collaborative, he was helpful, he was suggestive. He's the kind of guy that would put his arm around you, walk down the hall and talk with you. And you went away going, well, I probably could have been spanked, but instead I feel good about getting back in the ring again. And so Norm was real good that way. And again, you said clients. We were in that hotel as an in-house production or in-house AV company.
Sure.
So he was a client. He was our client. And then on another local basis in our Chamber of Commerce in Rochester, I became acquainted with the woman who was in charge or responsible for all of their events. And over time, I learned how good she was. And she didn't have a lot of fancy outdoor outside training. She just homebrew, learned how to do things, and did them with conviction. And so Susan George was a real good client that way, but her events grew. She started amassing all sorts of people at these events in the community because I think her content generation, but I think we helped make it a show. It wasn't just spoon feeding a little bit of content here. It was content with a purpose that was backed up by some showy stuff.
Yeah.
And so she was real good at embracing that kind of technology and running with it.
Absolutely. And I think that is a challenge for a lot of event companies, is trying to get the client to embrace change. I think so many times that clients are just used to doing the same thing over and over again because it's easy. And I think honestly, in any industry, regardless of whether it's audiovisual or events or whatever, change is difficult for people when it comes to a large event. But then again, at the same token, when it comes to the attendees, they like to see change. They like to see something new and fresh and cool. We had talked about uh, your the impact of some clients that you worked with, um, but I was just curious if there were any VIP celebrities or interesting people that you met in the industry, and how did they once you met that person, how did they inspire you?
Well, one guy I met was Bill Marriott, and he spoke at an event that was, I'll call it cozy because it was on a campus at a little college in Rochester. I was able to get to him afterwards, speak to him, and he spoke a lot about the state of the industry, and that was during the time, that the changeover from, maybe some of these viewers won't remember this, but there were a lot of travel agents in the world, and they were booking hotel rooms and airline tickets and such like that. And that was happening fast. And they were having some difficulty with their clients, which were those people, and how to keep them going because they said, we're not going to pay for reservations anymore. And
Mhm.
it was fascinating how he talked through that a little bit. He talked about the value and the ultimate. At that point, I think he said some reduction in costs for the client, the end user, us that travel to the hotels. And he also rolled out their ambition at the time of extending the brand. I think there was two or three brands they still didn't have on the table, but he talked about those coming out. And so to have both the current view, that whole business with the travel agents and so forth, and then the long term view about rolling all these hotels out and what the industry really wants to segment into. They want a small, little, no frills property all the way up to the Ritz Carlton. I think getting an understanding of that, he really impressed me with that, and here's a guy, his family, the Marriott family is quite a big deal. So that really impressed me. He was one that I saw that was really, really thinking about everything that he needed to do to make things right.
Gotcha. That's great.
I've also, like you get in this business, it's very difficult to not meet celebrities.
Yeah.
And we've also, you've probably pinned mics on hundreds of them. I've probably talked to half a dozen or so. And as you roll along, it's very interesting to see how they, and this is an odd thing to say about how they've influenced you, but everybody gets nervous for something like this.
Abs-
Everybody, even the best have a little jitter. And I think being able to be around those folks and talking to them and getting that out of them a little bit, and us saying, we're going to do this or that. And so be prepared. I think just learning that it's a small little thing, but everybody's nervous. And the more you can do to focus on them and take away that concern, that's really big. I mean, that drifts over a little more to the technical side,
Mhm.
but it's the same. You may be working with that person just directly one on one as you're the salesperson.
Absolutely. It's actually quite ironic that you say that because um, back, and this is going back probably both when we both worked at a Crown Plaza in Rochester. Um, Mary Tyler Moore had come because she was going to speak at a John Walsh event for missing children. And she had come into the ballroom, and I was just getting everything set up. Finally got everything set up, and she asked me, she goes, "Do you mind if I go up to the podium there and practice my speech?" And I said, Absolutely." I'm like, No offense, Miss Moore, but uh, you've been doing this for years.
You're a movie star.
You're a movie star. You're not supposed to be nervous." And she goes, "Honestly, if I wasn't nervous, I'd be doing the wrong thing." And then what really impressed me was that after she was done practicing her speech, she came down and sat at one of the tables with me and just asked me about my job, my family, what kind of things I did. And so she became, rather than this, person on a pedestal, she became just another person like myself. And that was the most refreshing experience that I've ever had, honestly, with celebrities. You had mentioned that sometimes there are struggles when it comes to uh, sales, and um, you had mentioned, the struggle that uh, Marriott was trying to get over regarding the travel industry. Had there been anything in your past that made you question your effectiveness in the event industry, and how did you overcome that?
Sure, gonna get the chills talking about it again, and it's 4 years, 5 years ago. But COVID really hit me in my role hard.
Yeah.
First of all, it goes without saying, everybody was scrambling, trying to find their footing. Nobody knew what to do.
Hmm.
The technical people knew how to do it, but we didn't know what to do, and that's a big difference there. And
Sure.
so as they gelled and figured out, what to do, I had to learn a whole lot more stuff that I didn't know before. And as I have mentioned, the technical support kind of person that I would always carry into any account, that relationship between that person and me with the client was key to selling. I mean, they were the ones that sold the account by being confident and conveying. But when COVID came, not only were they finding their way a little bit or a lot, they didn't have time for me, and that was really different. I sat at my desk many times thinking, I got to get some, I got to call Eric, or I got to call Joe or somebody, and calling them, and they're slammed. And so the pressure, once we got our footing to, continue doing what we were doing, I never felt ancient till then. And then
Yeah.
I was like, oh Lord, all these years I've been selling and I didn't need to know the technical stuff. And now I do. And
Yeah.
that was, that rolled along for several months before we kind of got our way and figured it out. And, I knew what I had to do. But for me, for a guy my age and 30 years of experience, it was really, it was uncomfortable. It was not the best situation for me for a long time.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads back to the topic of embracing change. Um, if I go back 10 years ago, I would have never thought that I would do an interview via the internet and not be in person and bring a whole bunch of equipment. And I think COVID really pushed that it was possible to do virtual meetings, and it was possible to um, have stuff continue if you couldn't be there in person. And I think, excuse me, I think that pre-COVID, it was a hard push for people to embrace doing something online. I remember back when we were trying to push a virtual exhibit hall, and people just did not want anything to do with that. But then when we were forced to because of COVID, you just kind of had to embrace that change. And there are still a bunch of companies that I know of that are thriving because of that. But that's now become, your maybe your backup, or a certain niche where it just makes more sense to do it online.
And we had a situation too that the big boys, the other big AV companies, had started to do,
Sort
they
of like
had
an e-poster.
there you go. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And so we headed down that path, and both on the introductory level to the client as well as to our staff, trying to work with the limitations that we had with the technology available was pretty pretty risky, but we pulled it off. And I think you probably remember, I think we bought a whole mess of monitors one time and
Oh yeah.
programmed them all and got some slick little PowerPoints or keynote presentations to work. And so we were able to enter that space and push our clients into it, which heretofore, those were typically things we gave to a client
Mhm.
because the posters came from their decorator, and if we had to light a hall or something, we just did it. But once we started selling our technology, then we could get some money for it, and it worked out that way.
So if someone were looking to get into um, event sales, uh, where would you recommend them to take any classes or do some research um, it, that would help your career?
So a couple of things I've already mentioned was those industry organizations.
Hmm.
I think that any fairly decent salesperson, someone that has some of the skills, if they get into the right environment, I think they're going to be able to move into this space. But that right environment is kind of, I was fortunate to have the model we had, which was tech support. I mean, I think if you've got a strong group of PMs and technical people that you can rope in. So anybody, the point to that is, as a baseline, some good skills and some good understanding of what you need to do to get the job done is critical to entering this area. And then one other thing, and I'll say this, you got to tell people you don't know something, and you'll get back to them. Be able to do that.
Yeah,
But I think that wherever people are teaching anything about selling, that's a good place to go. If you can find your way into the communities such as ASAE or MPI or PCMA that have segments within, some of those places have real good education for people in our world as well. Um, Trying to get a position, I think you got to be real persistent.
absolutely. So speaking of that, and I know that you know different facets because, for instance, one of the other podcasts that we had talked about um, companies that build the set designs and things like that. So, coming from a sales perspective, if someone wanted to get into the AV event industry, now I'm talking they have no experience, but the industry really looks interesting to them or it excites them, where would you recommend that, how would they get in um, from your perspective?
I'm going to go back to a little bit of the local stuff again. If you're in a community and there are players in the community that you would want to work for, you keep knocking on the doors of your other relationships, the Chamber of Commerce, the CDB, and so forth. If you're doing the right thing in your current job or wherever you've been where you've had sales experience, and you can get their attention, that's the best way to do it. I think somebody else calls and puts in a recommendation, and we all know,
Oh,
you could
absolutely.
hire people all the time because of that, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that's a good way to try and do it. Showing interest in their business. It's kind of difficult, but if you could say, "Hey, I'm real interested. I know you think I'm from the outside looking in because I don't have this kind of experience." Maybe you go to a couple of events. Ask them, "Can I come to a couple of events and just look around? Hang on your arm for 10 minutes or stand in the back." Um, any of that kind of stuff would be, I think, valuable to an owner or HR person or someone like that that's looking at hiring this kind of a position.
Yeah, and I think that's probably how the owner of the company that we both worked for um, found you was that at a local event. And so if I get the gist of what you're saying is join local industry um, groups, whether it be a CVB or a Chamber of Commerce, so that you can get some one-on-one time with that prospective client that you want to work for. That way they can find out more about you rather than just sending them a resume and saying, hey, can I get an interview for this position?
Mhm. Yeah, well put. I think it's those instances. Pick up the phone. you call people and you try and get them persuaded to buy something from you. It never works. When was the last time you answered a call and said, yes, I want to buy it right now? So
Yeah.
you want to get in front of those people. You want to have the FaceTime. Let them understand your personality. Let them see you walk through a big building somewhere and meet other people or have interactions with other clients. I think that's a good way. There's a ton of ways that I'm not as knowledgeable about because I spent 20 years doing what I'm doing and never looked for work after that.
Mhm.
But clearly, all of the new fangled methods
Yeah.
with digital marketing of yourself work. Um, I know of a person right now who just recently applied to see if she could jump careers and over into the florist business, wedding design, flowers, all that.
Yep.
And she created a very clever website with stuff that she pulled together on her own. She sat at home and make stuff and had a very cool name for it. And she sent that to a woman at a florist shop, and the woman was like, wow, where have you been working? She was blown away by it. She says, well, I haven't. I just did that for this little presentation, and I
Nice.
think I can do it for you.
Well, good for her.
So, yeah,
I think one thing that really stuck with me, that you taught me was, like you just said, pick up the phone. There had been many times where I had a good relationship with someone, and it was quickly going to go south. Based upon a back and forth email or a back and forth text. And I think one thing that really stuck with me was that you kind of hammered in, pick up the phone and call that person, because um, it's a whole lot easier to gauge someone's intent based upon inflection of tone and being able to continue a relationship via a phone than if you're just sending an email or a text.
absolutely. And I think I probably also said, I say it a lot, is let your stomach be your guide. Let your gut tell you. If you're getting that weird feeling when you're reading that second or third ping pong text or email back and forth, it's like, let's get this nipped. I'd rather spend 15 minutes on a phone call and make sure we both understand each other. And I would segue that a little bit, Eric, to the contract situation too. So many people are, nervous about that. Um, One client in particular, who I really admired and respected, she worked for the National Fire Protection Agency, and NFPA was one of our customers. And the first time we did a contract, she sent it off to an attorney, and it was like none of what I wrote was any good. But her note said different. Her note said, these are the areas of concern, blah, blah, blah. And so let's get on a call and have a conversation. And so it's simple stuff, like we'll have the room set up for you. Well, when will you have the room set up? 7 o'clock, if it's an 8 o'clock event. Okay. Just add that to the contract. And so with her, we stepped through multiple tenants, facets of a contract,
Mhm.
and just got clarification, you know. And she was good about that. I mean, she counted staff. She said, well, what's this guy over here doing? Oh, this guy's doing that. And so it was impressive that she handled her work the way she did. I was nervous, but I picked up the phone and we talked and it worked out really well.
Nice.
I think the thing that I would impart to everyone that's going to embark in a sales career is learn this. Learn how to say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Exactly.
Those are the most powerful words you can use with a client in building a relationship.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Chip. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to do this. And to our viewers, we'll see you on the next gig.
So there you go.
All right.
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's been fun, and I enjoyed it.